Welcome back to this episode of Todd's podcast. Our inaugural guest for our yet unnamed series that we're starting on small business and entrepreneurial companies, and this is why we're working on a new name, is because I can't really say it, and I can't really spell it. But our inaugural guest is the great Walker Peak. He is president of his company that he founded in 2013. It's called Commercial Acoustics. And Walker came in second as the most interesting man in the world contest a few years ago. That's quite an accomplishment, very impressive. Walker studied structural engineering at the University of Florida with a minor in business industrial engineering at Columbia. And he also was a contractor at NASA. He performed engineering studies on the launch infrastructure and commercial crew programs. He has an ASQ black belt certification. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but we'll ask him. He also oversaw aerospace manufacturing operations at nearby Space Shuttle Logistics Depot, and Walker founded his company, like we said, in 2013. We're going to talk to Walker about how he founded his company, what he was doing when he did find it, and he's also patented a soundproofing curtain, creating manufacturing plant for acoustical panels and also soundproofing products. And ultimately, he has become a certified industrial noise control engineer. And the result of all that was a product that you've patented, is that correct?
We kind of abandoned the provisional patent after a few years. That product line was one of our top revenue drivers for probably a decade. And last year, we had to finally put it to bed and move on to greener pastures.
Okay. But that product was called Wall Blocker. Walker and his team were awarded the National Multifamily Housing Council's Innovation Award in 2018. So welcome, Walker. We're glad you're here. Appreciate you coming over.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So this series that we're creating is about entrepreneur. I love entrepreneurs. I am one. I respect the heck out of them. And those that have an idea, they fight to get it funded and bring it to market. And also, almost full disclosure, Walker and his company did the acoustics for our studio in here. So if we don't sound rich and full-bodied like a fine bottle of MD 2020, well, it's Walker's fault. If we do sound good, you'll get credit for that.
I was limited to where you would let us put the panels for the record. So.
Yes. So, but it sounds good. We've had great compliments on the studio. Was talking to you in the pre-interview, say, what's kind of one word to sum it up? And you said, we install acoustic ceiling tile and acoustical panel and baffles in commercial projects like theaters, auditoriums, offices, and throughout the Southeast. Is that probably the best one-liner to describe what it is that you do with your company?
Yeah, so Commercial Acoustics is who we are and what we do. So ceilings that go up over above your head in office spaces. The wall blocker is still very much one of our top product lines, which is a soundproofing membrane. The product line that we no longer do is the soundproofing curtains. We kind of got out of the residential space, and we can talk about that. But direct-to-consumer is a tough market nowadays with Amazon and some other big competitors out there.
How did you come up with your name and your logo?
So the name, so it was Residential Acoustics at first.
Okay.
And we just wanted something broad that kind of described what we did. And then when we pivoted to out of residential over to commercial work, it was kind of a natural extension to change it. Unfortunately, we did try to trademark the name, and we were told it's too generic, like descriptive of what we do, which kind of makes sense. So we cannot register the trademark. And then the logo, we just went on like Fiverr, and you paid somebody $5 and said, make it look like, put our name in there and make it look like sound bars. And that's what they did. And it looks awesome. So
$5 gets you the start.
Yep, exactly.
And one of the things I want to explain and explore is how you got started and the process of what you went through to create your company and create your product. When you were growing up, were you like a boy genius? Were you like real smart? Were you athletic, or is this just, how did you come up with the idea of this company?
Nerdy is what Rachel was saying in the car, I think. We're going straight from here to Miami for a Mercedes-Benz project. So I'll tell you kind of what we've turned into nowadays, what kind of work we're doing. Growing up, I've always said it was a big advantage to have a sibling like 1 or 2 years older than you, because when they're doing their flashcards, you get to kind of learn a year in advance. So shout out to my brother Austin for letting me kind of piggyback on his learning experience. And I was just always a math-oriented, science-oriented kid. Always knew I wanted my own business. So early on, I knew that it's something I wanted to pursue in my life.
Were you frustrated at when you worked at NASA about not having more of a free reign to be creative, or once you finished that, you then say, "Hey, I got to figure out what to do with the next phase of my life"?
Working at NASA was a big eye opener as far as federal bureaucracy. Right now, obviously, we've got DOGE going on, which is Department of Governmental Efficiency. And despite your political leanings, I would have to say that I've never seen inefficiency like that rampant or widespread. And that's when Elon came in and started SpaceX, and they were kind of just running circles around a lot of the work that we were doing. So about that time is when I knew I didn't want to stay with the government and wanted to move to something more private and kind of a startup.
What drove you to really wanting to go into business for yourself? I mean, you don't have to work for the government. You can go work for someone else, but something struck you that said, "Hey, I kind of want to do something on my own."
And I don't know when the bug started. I do give a shout out to my early mentor, Carol Craig, who I worked with over in Kennedy Space Center. She gave me my first job out of college. And she kind of showed me how to start a company and like all of the background processes. I loved her lifestyle where she could kind of go and seem like she could do whatever she wanted to do. Now in hindsight, I realized that maybe it's not that kind of jet setting, go wherever you want kind of thing, but you have a lot of control over the outcome. And so I enjoy that kind of ability to choose the strategy and the tactics to go make a dream reality.
Did you have any latitude when you were over at NASA, or were you very structured? Hey, today this is what you're working on tomorrow?
Well, I was like 21.
Right.
So they didn't give me any latitude.
Okay.
No, it was very structured. There was very little freedom.
Well, how did you come up with your product and come up with this idea of the commercial acoustic and the acoustic sound quieting, deadening, whatever I'm trying to say?
Sure. Well, the real disclosure here, Todd, is that I am married to your niece.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
that's right. So at the time, she was in med school, or she was in residency, I think, at USF. And we were in Tampa, and I was drinking beers with my buddy Dylan late at night, trying to come up with like an idea of how to start a business. And I was in entrepreneurship class in grad school at Columbia at the time. And it said, find a problem. Wherever there's a problem, there's a solution that people might want to spend money on. And we were coming up with a list, and Liz said, "Hey, y'all need to be quiet. I'm trying to study for boards or whatever."
Was she that pleasant when she said it?
She said...
Did she say it with a little more enthusiasm?
It started gently, and it ended with "shut up or get out." And that's when the genesis of the idea, that's a big problem that a lot of people have, is your neighbors or your roommates are annoyed by your voice or
Right.
just your noise. And so we started working on soundproofing curtains for doors, for windows. And that was the initial product. I got like a YouTube account, and I started watching this YouTube channel of how to make your first website. And on the other screen, I Googled and I found HostGator, and I started our first website, and I started putting this thing together. And it was after like maybe 2 months where somebody put in their credit card info and spent $300 on the soundproofing curtain. And I couldn't believe it. It was the worst website ever, and I was shocked that they would spend money on it, but they did.
So were you just sitting in the basement for 2 or 3 months with your buddy drinking beer and trying to come up with a product, or were you on a little bit shorter leash than that?
Well, I still had my full-time job, and anybody who's interested in doing their own thing, it's a huge opportunity to try to overlap those, because financially speaking, I mean, Liz wasn't making any money.
Right.
I think we were still paying for her to go to residency.
Right.
So, to be able to overlap them was an awesome opportunity. And no, it probably took 2 months to prototype it. I was laughing with my mom yesterday because we were sewing the first prototype of the soundproofing curtain, and I didn't know there was something called a bobbin underneath the sewing machine where like the needle has to go into like a loop. And I called her, I said, Mom, I cannot figure out the sewing machine. And she said, was the bobbin wound properly? I said, I don't know what a bobbin is. So she came down and saved the day.
So you owe this to the two strongest women in your life, your wife and your mother.
Exactly.
Were you doing soundproofing? Were you in that line over at NASA, or you just came up with this? You and your buddy came up totally random?
Yep, random. And just with the help of Google, we looked at a bunch of products. There's a lot of terrible marketing out there in the soundproofing space. So like people think that you can block noise by putting up these acoustical panels when really they're just good for echo or reverberation reduction. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. So you had to dig through that, prototypes, got free samples. It took a couple months before we got our initial, what we call the minimum viable product, like the very first full prototype. And I put it up over my window, and we were right next to the Selman that cuts straight through South Tampa. Right. And I was shocked at how much sound it actually blocked.
So you had no background in this world of sound. So that's a lesson for people out there, is you don't have to have a background. You started from scratch. You did the research. First, you came up with an idea to solve a problem. Sounds like what your first initial thing was.
Yeah, and there's enough addressable market of, I mean, there's millions of people that live in Florida, and a lot of them live in urban environments with loud, exterior noise. So, or have roommates that annoy them. So it was kind of an obvious opportunity. The solution, that's the harder part sometimes, is can you make it for a price that when you sell it, you can actually make a profit.
Right.
And eventually that's why that residential market we kind of got, I would say, squeezed out of, or just kind of chose to leave.
Right.
The amount of customer service that each individual person needs. Nowadays, all of our work is purely commercial, and I'll tell you about some of the projects. But
yeah, we'll get to those.
Yeah, sure.
Todd's podcast is sponsored in part by Saunders Real Estate, your trusted partner in land and commercial real estate since 1996. With over 125 expert advisors located throughout the Southeast United States, the full-service brokerage specializes in a wide range of property types, from farms and ranches to commercial buildings and development land. If you're looking to build your legacy with a confident investment, please visit SaundersRealEstate.com or call 877-518-5263 to connect with an advisor today. Are you kind of the creative genius in the company? You're the technical guru. I think you've been a small company. You're starting to add employees, and you're starting to have other people do some of the jobs that you all had to do at the very beginning. What role do you have in your company now? Is it just, hey, I'm a visionary? Sounds like y'all are heading down to Miami to meet with clients or to talk to a customer or something?
Yeah, so neither genius nor guru, just for the record. Nowadays, I spend the vast majority of my time either auditing processes or training people. And so if they're doing something a little differently than I would, not necessarily that they're doing it wrong or they could do it better, but trying to ensure everybody's doing it the same way. We don't really have process flows built in. So these are things that we had to create over time, and it's enabled us to grow quickly. And we've I saw your Gator 100 award, by the way. Mm-hmm. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's something that we've been part of the last maybe 4 or 5 years now. And every year we've kind of accelerated our growth.
Awesome.
And it's all good till it's too much. And then you're like, wow, I need to hire some people and train them.
Right. And that's a little about what we did last year. Is Dean Gary and I, with Dean carrying the load, kind of managed the company, and we're building it. And then it was like, hey, we're not necessarily the best people to then take it to the next step. And we tapped a couple of young guys that were here to be our president and our chief operating officer, and they do the day-to-day stuff. They take on Dean's vision of growing the company, and they do stuff that we don't know how to do, mm-hmm. and that they're willing to do to make the company bigger. We've expanded into Arkansas. We've been in Georgia. We're open in Tampa in a couple of weeks, I hope. We've signed a lease. So, there are limitations of what you can do as one person. And it sounds like how many people are in your company?
So we're probably W-2 headcount around 35.
Okay.
And then we have a couple of subcontractor crews, another 20 or so. So we're in the 50 to 65 range right now.
Do you handle all the manufacturing in-house, or do you contract that out with outside sewers or manufacturers, whatever?
So we manufacture our products in-house, which is like the Echo Eraser acoustical panel, and that the wall blocker, which is a soundproofing membrane that goes behind drywall for soundproofing. And then I would say 90% of our revenue stream nowadays is furnish and installing Armstrong or Conway, these big manufacturers. The architect specifies it, we go and buy it and resell it at a markup. And so we only probably manufacture maybe 10% of our overall products now.
So when you started off what, 1,000 feet, 1,200 square feet?
Yep.
In the back of a bakery somewhere?
In the back of a cabinetry shop.
Cabinetry shop.
That was a big mistake.
And how big are you now?
We just bought a new warehouse on North Florida
Okay.
in Seminole Heights, and it's 15,000 square feet, 2,000 of office space, and then the rest of manufacturing and warehousing. And then we've got 3 kind of satellite offices, if you will. I'm putting the air quotes on that because it's really just the sales reps' houses, but it gets us a place on Google My Business. So
The wall blocker, that was kind of your first real statement into the business world, into this business?
yes, yeah, the wall blocker, we sell it in all 50 states. It basically, when the architect is designing a new apartment complex or condo or what have you, or movie theaters, the key is you don't want to be watching Mission Impossible 3 next to The Notebook. And I probably need to update this reference because both of those are like 20 years old. But like,
You watched The Notebook?
love The Notebook.
Oh.
And you've got the romantic kiss scene, and then you don't want the dum 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 kind of coming through the walls. So you have to have what's called a high STC, sound transmission class, to stop that sound transmission. So architects call us and we help them design these walls. And the great irony is that what architects typically do, that their go-to is to just kind of add layers of drywall
Right.
onto the wall, which is a very inefficient and sometimes actually makes the wall worse for soundproofing. So what we tell them to do is, hey, get rid of 3 layers of drywall, add a single layer of wall blocker. You save, 3 inches of space, you save a couple $100,000 on your movie theater, and it increases your soundproofing. And that was our first kind of eureka kind of opportunity.
Is that just a thin membrane? Is that what wall blocker is? Like
Yep.
a sheet, or not a sheet, but a highly technical sheet of material?
It's a rolled good, so it doesn't come in sheets. It comes in
Right.
rolls, and it's kind of like Tyvek, like the exterior
Right.
moisture wrap, but thicker and heavier.
It seemed to me that in some other space that we've built out for different clients is they've put a couple of layers of sheetrock in for fire protection. Does your product offer any fire protection, or is that yours is strictly for sound? The fire protection is something else that the architect has to design.
Yeah, so there's a couple ASTM codes on this, and I won't get all technical on it, but if you need a 2-hour rating, then we're not going to help you go from 1 to 2 hours.
Okay.
It's called ASTM E119. But if you have a 1-hour rated assembly or a 2-hour, but our product is compatible for both. And UL Laboratories is the one that certifies that.
And all this is come from, you never had any background in this. Your parents are both attorneys, so you were never really exposed to this. Is this what you did at NASA with any sound stuff, or this is totally a brand new concept that you and your buddy came up with? And
It was a new concept, but with the research, it's really important to reach out to subject matter experts out there that don't consider you a competitor, because they're not going
Right.
to teach you or tell you anything. So I found some vendors, and one of them was out of Mount Airy, North Carolina, John Bishop. And so we wrote a book together. Essentially, it was called Architectural Acoustics, a Practical Handbook for Contractors. And
can't wait to get a hold of that one and read.
the whole point is that there's no literature out there. Like, the reason why everybody does it wrong is there's only 2 textbooks out there, and John gave me a copy of each of them, and I read them a few times, and I just paraphrased it into actual practical guidance.
Right.
Because these textbooks are for opera houses or like symphony halls.
Right.
how many of those are actually being built, in the state
Shrink
of
it down
Florida?
for a studio,
Yeah, exactly.
or shrink it down for a theater.
So this is very practical of, oh, I'm building an office or an apartment complex or something like that. What do I actually need to know? And that's what we ended up writing about. And it probably took a year and a half. Rachel helped me with all of the graphics. Now we're turning these into like YouTube shorts, essentially, so like people can see what we're talking about. And that's been a great go-to-market for us as well. So I always say the best way to learn is to teach. And by bringing on engineers and estimators and project managers, I've taught them over the years. And every time I teach them, I'm like, yeah, actually, that does make sense. That's why that works.
Was wall blocker, did you patent that?
Nope. It is that there's intellectual property from the manufacturing perspective, but it's not protected by copyright or patent law.
Have you patented any of your products?
Nope. The only patent that we went through with was the provisional for the initial acoustic curtain.
Okay.
And after spending, I don't know, 15 grand on legal fees and not even starting the non-provisional draft, which is the one that actually goes in front of the USPTO.
Right.
And it's like, what's the word? Reviewed for its merits. I was 15 grand in, and the lawyer just told me, hey, actually, you're not going to have a lot of protection on this. I said, what am I spending all this money on? So
can I get my 15,000 back?
Exactly.
What are some of the barriers that you had to overcome when you had this idea, you started getting into production? What did you have to overcome to get to where you are today?
So the benefit of small end clients, what we call them now, which is like studios like this, is there's a deposit payment and then a net 15 final payment. A big barrier to entry in the commercial contracting side of things, which has really been our focus over the last, let's say, 6 years or so, is capital. Is that it's called milestone billing. You don't get any deposit payments, so you have to pay for everything. Submit what's called a pay app, and then you get paid sometimes 30 days later, sometimes 90 days later. So you're floating all those labor and material costs for months. And so for commercial contracting, access to capital is huge. I can't really think of a specific one on the direct-to-consumer side because there weren't that many barriers. Like it's actually very, very easy to go start your own business,
Right.
File an LLC and start a website and just start selling stuff.
Sounds like looking at a YouTube video or two or three and
Yeah.
sitting around and having your fiance
Yell at you.
yell at you a little bit, constructively yell at you.
Well, it lights a fire.
It lights a fire. Talking about access to capital, you had 15,000 basically into the start of your patent, and then that you pulled the plug on. Was your venture capital intensive up front? It sounds like you're doing everything kind of on a shoestring as you go along, and you didn't have some philanthropist come in and say, here's $5 million, Walker, go create this.
No, we like bootstrapped it for the first, let's say, 2 years, and then we did get some investors back in 2016 or 17, the Baldwin Group, which is like a family office, and they put in some financing for us they made me hit very aggressive milestones, but if we hit revenue and profit goals, they aligned it in tranches, so it released certain amounts of funding. And it's ended up being a great partnership for us. And aside from that, recently we partnered with Valley Bank, who we finally got a line of credit after 12 years, which was pretty
Wow.
nerve-wracking. I always believed in not having any debt. I've always been a big Dave Ramsey guy, super
Right.
financially conservative. But at the end of the day, you can't take on big projects without a line of credit. So that's what we've had to take on this past year or two.
Well, and part of that is to float your accounts receivable.
Yes.
Is you just have to be able to survive until the payment comes
Yes.
in. Are you finding collecting payment difficult being a small company?
Yes.
I get paid at closing. I get paid the day the transaction
Right.
typically happens. It doesn't sound like that happens for you.
So the reason that they don't pay usually isn't like animosity or like a
Right.
dispute. It's really just getting all the paperwork approved. In these contracts, which are generally 100 to 200 pages, there's a pay when paid provision in 99% of them. And so they're not going to pay you until the client pays them. We just finished the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando, and we finished the entire project In 5 months, it was 20,000 square feet, 70 feet high, like on an atrium lift. So we were $500,000 into this project, waiting on our material pay app
That's
from
a big
in
accounts
August.
receivable for a small company.
And it's January, and they're yelling at us saying, y'all need to come in here this morning. There's like 2 fabric frays on this one panel. There's like a thread that's discolored. And I said, you owe us $500,000 for 5 months now.
Right.
And they're saying, hey, we haven't been paid by the client. So you have to add it to your pricing structure, because it's 6 or 7% or whatever, that ends up being a few $1,000s a month.
Right.
And so you will get paid eventually. They're not going to not pay you, but you have to make sure you have access to capital and that you're adding in those fees into your pricing.
And starting off, you were also the finance department of your company. You were accounts payable, accounts receivable, and a little bit of all that.
Early on, you're everything.
Yeah. And I think that's, one, it's interesting because you do have to learn it. And sometimes you're better at some things than others. But I think that's one of the neat parts about being an entrepreneur, is having that idea and overcoming those obstacles. And yours has been big obstacles and some smaller ones, but you've been able to figure out a way to do that. Is your business still growing? Is it growing at a rate that you want it to grow? Are you looking for capital? Say if I had
$1 million.
Here, can I write you a check? Just don't cash it for 5 months. Is that what's kind of slowing you down or slowing your growth, is access to capital?
I think the biggest thing we've learned this past year, so we've been growing on average at 70% for the past really 8 years in a row. Some years at 50, some years at 100. 100 is too fast, I think, to be methodical, and it can be a little stressful at times.
Right.
And with the bigger contracts we've taken on, we have found that we have to evolve our pricing. There's a lot of hidden costs, like when you need OSHA 30 guys, or just all this kind of stuff that the bigger contractors require of you. They're kind of hidden costs. So we'll price it like, hey, I'm going to go do Uncle Todd's podcast studio. Okay, 2 guys for a day. Well, when you come in here and you have to do daily stretches, and your first 3 days on site is all safety training, well, now it's 2 guys for 2 weeks to do the same amount of work.
Right.
And so we've had some profit margin erosion, we call it, over the past couple years. Revenue continues to accelerate and grow very quickly, but I pump the brakes sometimes if I feel like we're not hitting our overall goal. And we're not a software startup, where
Right.
it's all about revenue. Profit is my main, our driving factor. And then something I want to go on record that's been super beneficial for us has been a profit share program. So every 6 months, we use 10% of our profit, and we get put in an operational bonus program, and we give it out to all of our staff that isn't on a different incentive plan, aka the sales reps. And at the end of every year, we take 20% of our profit and we assign that for raises. And so by getting everybody, it's kind of like an ESOP, but without the legal fees, is we make sure that all of our profit is reinvested in the staff. And because of that, we've had very little turnover over the years, and everybody wants to be lean.
Yeah.
They all want to make a profit for the company.
Well, I've rewarded Eli with the Jelly of the Month Club. That's what he gets every month, and I think it's guava this month. So he seems to be very appreciative of the work environment that we've created here at Todd's Podcast.
Can't wait. I'm so excited.
It may be apricot next month if you're really lucky.
Hey, listeners.
Hey everyone.
Hola.
Hi all.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
This is Rob Palumbo.
This is Fred Hyde.
This is Juliet Ashley Vide.
Dr. Angela Garcia Falconetti.
This is Congressman Scott Franklin.
This is Margie Grant.
This is Jake Palumbo.
And I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Please make sure that you like and or subscribe.
Don't forget.
Don't forget.
Don't forget to subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. Tune in and listen.
Join in and listen to us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So you've got different types of people you've got to have skilled labor, you've got to have technical people. What's your feeling of college degrees versus technical college?
So probably the biggest issue growing in the last 2 years was finding ceiling mechanics. And that's the trade name for what we're looking for. Somebody who's on stilts and goes up and puts up ceilings. And so they don't really exist anymore. It's kind of like plumbers and welders.
Are they the guys that do the drywall ceilings? Is that what you mean by ceiling
Yeah, but instead of the
mechanics,
drywall ceilings, like the acoustical ceiling tile, those little
Right.
2x2 white tiles.
Right. But that's kind of how you would equate it to the person on stilts and
Yes.
putting the stuff up.
Yes, and it's a very skilled job. You need to know how to measure. You need to do basic math, but 1/16 inch has very tight tolerances, and you have to do it fast. And our guys
And over your head and on stilts.
and on your it's challenging. I tried to do it myself when we were very, very busy. Like we had grown too quickly, and we couldn't keep up with demand. I was out in the field the whole time. And nowadays, it's kind of swung in the other direction. We finally caught up with all the backlog, and we're like, we kind of forgot we have to keep selling.
Yeah.
So we're catching up on that side of things now. But getting skilled ceiling mechanics or installers is super difficult. I am a huge proponent of trade schools. I think it's the best option for a lot of people. And I think that your ROI on it is going to be much higher than going and getting a degree from a small school and you don't know what you want to do.
Right. That was kind of me. I mean, I was expected to go to college, as were my brothers and most everyone. And my son ended up going to a technical college and learning how to work on airplane engines. And he's done very well for himself. And, he didn't come out with a whole bunch of college debt. And, these people are going to have jobs when those of us that all we do is sell and talk. They'll be working long after we're gone. So,
Absolutely.
Do you go to the technical schools and say, hey, can I help you start a program? These are the trades that I need. Can you all work on a program and I'll keep them as an intern, or I'll take them as an intern? Have you tried doing those things? Or
We tried. Ultimately, the answer was we learned Spanish, and that's really opened up an entire side of the labor market that we did not have access to previously. So, when you can speak the native tongue of a lot of the people that are actually doing the work,
Right.
Suddenly, I mean, it's some of these crews, they can put up 5 times what we can in a single day. So we were trying to train people, and eventually we just went out and found the right people.
retrained yourself rather than training another workforce?
Yeah.
How about social media? Is that a big way that you get your word out? Or do you tend to use traditional marketing methods for your products and services?
So I was at the warehouse this weekend because we were putting logos on the trucks and the vans. So that's more of a traditional thing. We wear like our hats and our helmets and our shirts on site that says Commercial Acoustics, so the general contractors and architects know who we are. Social media is really not important for us. I mean, maybe LinkedIn a little bit. Our 2 biggest things is search engine optimization. So when websites link to your website, then you rise up in the rankings. And over the years, we've ended up getting 5,000 to 10,000 people per month click on our site. So if they're Googling soundproofing membrane or soundproof my wall, there's certain things that you want and certain things you don't want. We don't want soundproofing, because usually that's the mom at home who says my kid can't sleep because the dryer's too loud.
Right.
So you want something a little bit technical. You want to look for those what we call long tail keywords. The other thing that's really evolved a lot for us has been doing invitations to bid for general contractors, and that's very traditional. The contractor will send out an ITB to the universe, and they're saying, hey, I'm building a new theater. And if you can find that ITB and you can go bid on the scope of work, then that's how you end up winning the job. And those are the big jobs.
Right.
And that's what we really do, most of the time nowadays.
So contractors and architects are kind of who you're pushing yourself to and exposing yourself to say, hey, when you need this, we're the company that you need to go to.
Yes.
Do you read a lot of books for inspiration, direction for your company? I heard a podcast, apparently at 6 years old, you talked about a book that John Morgan had read or had written.
You Can't Teach Hungry.
Can't Teach Hungry. I think that is one of the greatest titles ever.
Yeah.
And also you had credited Jack Welch with some of your background thought processes of running your company.
Yeah, I mean, early on, I was doing a lot of reading. Nowadays, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, as you well know, so reading's kind of gone out the window, more or less. I'm running the company by day and then, dad at night, so very little strategic kind of reading like that. I'd still do a lot of podcasts and a lot of audiobooks, but yeah, there's a number of books that I thought were very inspirational for me early on. 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, and You Can't Teach Hungry by John was awesome because it was like you can go teach somebody any technical skill, but you got to go find those guys that want to go and succeed, have a lot of ambition, and then show them. Sorry,
and need to work and need to work like that.
100%.
And
those those young bucks y'all brought in to help grow your business.
Correct. And one of the things I heard you say on the other podcast, also I wrote it down, was you said big eats little, but fast eats slow. I wrote that down because I said that's pretty cool. What did you mean by that?
I mean, being agile. We have a couple big competitors in our industry. Acoustics is probably the household name, and they're huge. They're probably maybe $1 billion, 500 million, something like that.
And you're just behind them?
Yeah, we're right behind them.
Them.
I mean, we're closing the gap, and we do it by being agile and not. We review contracts quickly. We do submittals, which is like the engineering side of the install, very quickly. We learn very quickly. When you pivot, it really opens up a lot of opportunities for you, and bigger companies have a really hard time pivoting.
Are you doing sales for the company, or do you have a dedicated sales force that's out there doing that, and you just kind of review what they're doing?
I am one of the 4 sales reps.
Okay.
I probably have the least sales time because a lot of my time is going and reviewing some of these installs.
Right.
And then we've got 3 estimators as well and a marketing person. So there's 8 kind of revenue generators on staff, and all of them are important to bring in the big projects.
Do they work across the country, or are you all headquartered out of the Tampa area, and then, hey, someone from Seattle or somewhere in Colorado calls and you send one of the guys or gals out to do that for you?
So we've got Orlando, Fort Myers, New Orleans, and then our HQ in Tampa. And so the reps are in the 4 locations, and then pretty much everybody else is in Tampa. And our work is all over. We just did a big military base, Fort Lejeune, up in North Carolina. And that was maybe a $2 million job. And there's something called D-bids we found out, which is a lot of paperwork you have to do. That was one of those hidden costs, and we couldn't send one of our faster crews because of that. So that one ended up being a big learning experience. But we also do California. We just did a big watch manufacturer, FP Journe, out there. So we're in, maybe 30 states, but most of our work is in Florida.
I don't really want to talk about politics on this podcast.
I do.
For obvious reasons. We can if you want to. You're the one who's got to go home. What direction do you think our economy is heading now that we have a new administration? We talk about it every Monday morning at our sales meetings because we're trying to figure out jobs, because that's important for us on how we're looking at real estate. How do you see what's going on in the economy affecting your growth and your projections?
Well, I actually really have no idea. I will say the tariffs really threw us for a loop the last couple of weeks. For whoever's listening to this in the future, this is March 10th or so.
Yep.
Trump put in place tariffs for 25% tariffs for Mexico and Canada on March 1, and then rescinded on March 4th, and now it's going to go back into place on April 2nd or something. And so a lot of our products come from Canada, the steel that goes into the ceiling grid. So that was a major issue because in our subcontracts, there's a non-escalation factor baked in. So if my cost went up 25%,
So
but I
you
can't
absorb it.
Well, I mean, we can't absorb it, so we just have to walk away from a lot of these jobs. We would have had to.
Right.
Do I think they'll go into place? I mean, I don't have a magic 8 ball. I think the answer is no. I think he's more posturing for better negotiation.
I 100% think that's what he's doing, is he's positioning himself for the negotiation. And just like you said, if he puts it on today, he can take it off tomorrow. And it doesn't make it any easier for those that are trying to figure out how to factor it into your business cycle.
It's tricky. And so the contractors have reached out to us asking us, are we affected? And I said, yes, we are.
Right.
So we're all trying to figure that out. As far as overall headwind or tailwind, I saw that there's like a 3% contraction in Q1, or maybe it was Q4 last year. But as long as, I've always said, like during COVID, we had the same kind of macroeconomic impacts. And as long as you are moving faster than the rivers kind of going downstream, if you're going faster than the speed of water, then you're still growing.
Right.
So you've got these kind of headwinds or tailwinds, but if you can, outrow it or outpace it, then, you're going to have a push or a pull on your growth. But ultimately, we just want to keep growing and grow profitably.
Florida does not seem to be slowing down with our growth. And
Florida
so
specifically is kind of
I
crazy.
think we're positioned here. Now, when you have to get your raw products, when you get your different things from different countries, certainly that has an effect on you. Hey everybody, this is your host Todd Dantzler. As most of you know, I'm a partner with Saunders Real Estate and have been a very active and working broker for over 42 years. I have fostered strong relationships throughout the state of Florida, working on properties ranging from agriculture and development land to multifamily, commercial, and industrial projects. If you have any real estate needs at all, please give me a call. I'd love to help. My direct line is 863-877-2846. Thank you. You said you want to talk politics. Have you ever thought about running for politics?
And I was being facetious, by the way.
I wasn't going to let you hang yourself.
I've come from a very conservative family, and I know that I married into what Liz terms a Southern Democrat family, so I don't know exactly what that means. I always wanted to go into politics, honestly, and I kind of thought I would do the business for 10 years and then kind of get it running on autopilot. It has not been the case. It takes more time now than it took 10 years ago. And then plus with the kids and, it's been maybe a great experience and a lot of fun and a great learning experience, but it has taken maybe a little bit longer to get it on autopilot than I thought it would. So I don't know.
I think politics, everyone should do it if you have the ability to do it, and more people have the ability to do it than they think they do. A lot of it is temperament. A lot of it is perspective. You had a little issue with the Tampa City Council.
Yep.
You want to tell us about that, or would you rather
Happily,
not? Are you still involved with them?
No, and
I had 3 different family members say, you need to ask him about his time in front of the city council at Tampa.
I don't know if I handled myself very, diplomatically. I was a little upset. There's a guy named Mike Suarez over there that would not return my calls or emails. I lived on Obispo and Church in South Tampa, and there was a road there that was at 25 miles per hour, and people would speed through there at sometimes 50 and 60 miles an hour.
And you have small children?
At the time, we didn't, but I guess while we were still there is when Anna was born.
Right.
And I painted on like a fold-up table. I spray painted like 25 miles per hour, acted like it was like a speed limit sign, and put it on the table next to like the road. And then I called one of our friends who was on WFLA, I think it is, and she sent like a news crew out there, and the very first car we clocked was going 62.
Wow.
And I was perfect time because I had never actually seen a car go that fast. But there was like 15-foot wide lanes, boulevard style street. And all I wanted them to do was put in some speed bumps or some like bike lanes to make the lanes a little bit narrower. And there was a gentleman in the 4th district. Oh, I'm forgetting his name right now. Cohen. And I called him, and he called me back right away. And I said, if you ever run for mayor, I would love to be like, on your team, because I would love to help. I mean,
Because he responded.
you were responsive, you were helpful, you gave us a list of options. And, I'm very, that's one reason I am a little bit more conservative, is I believe in more of the state and local rights, and local government is much more efficient in general. So yeah, I was impressed by that, and I did have a meeting with the city council, and I showed them all the records of the car accidents that were on our street, and things maybe got a little bit heated at one moment, but we got the bike lanes put in, so that was a W.
There is a process for speed bumps, speed humps that I didn't know there was until I became a county commissioner. And people said, I need a speed bump. And I said, well, why don't we just give you one? Mm-hmm. Well, not everyone wants a speed hump. Not everyone is concerned like you were. So I appreciate and applaud you for sticking with it and staying with it. I think we need smart people doing politics. Politics on the local level, to me, is the most important, because that's where everything is delivered. That's where you're getting roads paved, you're flushing toilets, that's where everything happens. And it's not so philosophical. It's more, hey, how do I make this work?
Sure.
So I agree with that.
From an efficiency perspective, the way I've always thought of it is every dollar that goes to your city hall you maybe get 90 cents on the dollar back, and the 10% is people's salaries and, debating, etc. And then every dollar that goes to Tallahassee, maybe you get 45 cents on the dollar back, and every dollar that goes to DC, you get 7 cents on the dollar back, because it's touching so many hands along the way. There's a machine of people, a bureaucracy that's, I know we don't want fraud, waste, and abuse, but it also comes down to efficiency at some point. You're better off having a little bit of abuse and more efficiency.
Yeah. If someone wanted to find out more about your company, your product, what would they do? How would you direct them? You wouldn't necessarily look for me as someone who's got a neighbor who's noisy, or, like you said, a child in one room and a washing machine in the other. How would someone that thinks, hey, you could really make my apartments better, you could make my theater better, you could make my studio better, how would they get in touch with you?
So commercial-acoustics.com, that's our website. And if you go on there, there's all kinds of tools we've built in for soundproofing calculators, acoustical calculators, different tools you can use to help. And really, like, if you've got an office, a conference room, or what have you, and it's too echoey, you can go in there and put in the dimensions, and it's a wood floor with drywall walls, and how much treatment do I need. So there's all kinds of tools we have in there. And then once you hit submit, if you want us to contact you, you just check this little box, and it gives you it sends an email to us, and we reach out to you.
Because I know you came and you did a sound study at Winter Haven Hospital.
Yes.
For us. There was different intersection points within different wards and different floors, and different times of the day, noise ramped up. And in a hospital, the patients really like to be kind of a quiet atmosphere.
Of course.
And you had done that. Is this something that, like sending you the email, I need a study done at this hospital or this office? I know when we started, we've got a lot of impervious walls around here, a lot of hard surfaces, and you had recommended some things, not just in our studio, but also in the office itself with sound quieting things.
Yeah, so that's the sound masking, the white noise, which is, you guys have exposed T-beams. It's kind of a historic building, so
Right.
It's very unique. Most offices have just acoustic ceiling tile. And so in those cases, the best thing to do is to pipe in background white noise, so you can't hear your neighbors or your office mates working 5 feet away. Every time they get a phone call, you can't hear that conversation. So it gives you a lot of speech privacy. The best thing is for architects and contractors and developers to reach out when they have questions, and whether it's sound masking for speech privacy or soundproofing for movie theaters, or just acoustical treatment or ceilings for big office spaces. I mean, that's our forte. And piggybacking on the hospital specifically, healthcare has become a major vertical for us, especially here in Florida right now. And there's a survey called HCAHPS, which is like the patient satisfaction survey when you leave the hospital. And the worst score, it's like 20 questions, and you have to say yes, no, or like sometimes always, usually, or never. And the biggest question that they fail on was, how well did you sleep, or did you sleep well? And the answer is never a lot of the time. And we do these studies for Kaiser and for Ochsner in Louisiana, or HCA here in Winter Haven High School, or Winter Haven Hospital. And
we're Baycare at Winter Haven Hospital.
Oh, excuse me, Baycare, yes. And we'll go into an overnight study in the ICU, and it's crazy. They keep all the lights on at night. And so in New Orleans, the nurses were getting up on the counters and like dancing at 2 a.m. We couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm here measuring
throwing
noise,
beads at them, huh?
It was insane. And they're like, I don't know why our ICU patients can't sleep at night.
Yeah.
And it's because these people are nocturnal. They sleep during the day and work at night. But the patients in the hospital are always interacting with people that are awake, so it can be
typically
very
not
difficult.
having a good day if they're in the hospital.
Exactly,
or a good night. It sounds like if someone is thinking of construction, of building something, designing something, they need to get with you early on in the process. So you're not an afterthought. You can be part of the pre-planning, and you can help with the design, which will save lots of money, lots of sound, lots of problems down the road.
Yeah, and the way that we help architects design their buildings is with these tools, so that we have like what's called a 3-part specification. So if they can basically just copy and paste it into their design package, and it's kind of a copy and paste opportunity for them to soundproof or deal with the acoustics without having to really understand the subject matter. and that's been very successful for us.
So architects may be your best market for growing your business, but contractors have got to be there. They've got to understand that's more maybe on the construction side of where you could come in as you're putting it in.
What kills us sometimes is we'll work with the architect to design the building, and we'll have panels in 300 different rooms with sound masking. The contractor starts building it and gives the subcontract to somebody else. So we never actually make any money on the job. So that's why it's important to work with both sides. The architect designs it with your products in mind or in the design, and then the contractor actually buys it. He spends the money.
You've been generous with your time. We've been here about 55 minutes. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you felt like, hey, this is something that it's probably good for us to get out, for people to know about your business, your line of business and what you do, that me not being a real great interviewer knows?
Fabulous interviewer, and that's the one question I'm not prepared for.
Okay.
No, I think we covered all the critical elements. I will say, and I don't know if it was Rick or Liz or somebody that told me this phrase, but I attribute it to General Patton that says, a good plan executed violently today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. And that's something I use every single day.
Right.
I get a lot of consultants that come in and they want to help you review your processes and, come in and just switch over your softwares. Everybody wants to switch your software system. Right. It's the worst.
Or your phone system,
yeah.
or your
everything, yeah.
or
your PEO, or your
CRM,
everything.
or anything. Yeah.
And it's really not, to me, at least for the first 10 years, until you get to that $10 million, $5 to $10 million revenue mark. It's much less about strategy and more about every single day going out and aggressively attacking your game plan for that day.
Right.
Because I deal with a lot of people. I hear a lot of ideas. All my friends now, because I've done a couple startups, and they'll reach out and say, I've got this new idea. And I'm like, the idea has nothing to do with it. It's all about, can you actually execute it?
Yeah.
And pivot as you're executing to find better opportunities.
Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. I know that you're going to get on your G7 and head back to Tampa or Miami as we finish up here.
Mercedes-Benz Miami right now. It's the one that Saban is actually running. He's like the manager of it. So
Nick Saban is managing a car dealership.
Owner / GM, I don't know,
but gosh.
Yeah. So we're gonna go down there and put in some acoustics.
But it's a product and it's a solution or problem that everyone has. There's noise everywhere. But thank you for coming in. I appreciate it very much. I wish you luck. Are you looking for capital? Are you kind of pretty good? How do you plan on growing? Is there anything that we can do other than calling you up and hiring you to come solve a problem for us?
Owners, architects, contractors, if you have any projects that need acoustical ceilings or really ceiling work or any kind of specialty acoustics, feel free to reach out to come to our website, see our products and our services, and just shoot us an email. It's our contact info is right at the bottom. Use our tools that are on there, and that's the best way to interact with our company.
And tell us the website one more time.
Yep, it's commercial-acoustics.com.
Very good. And you're based out of Tampa. You've got offices around. And thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. I wish you all a safe trip down to Miami, and I will see you soon.
All right. Thanks,
Walker
Todd.
Peak, thank you very much. Hey, everybody. I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast. This has been your host, Todd Dantzler. As always, don't forget to rate, review, follow, and subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you have any questions for me or any suggestions for future guests, please call or text our number at 863-288-0944 or visit todddantzler.com. Again, that's 863-288-0944 or visit my website, todddantzler.com. I look forward to hearing your questions and feedback, and please take care.